The sitting is resumed. Senator Lisa Cummins.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy President. I rise, first of all, to express appreciation to all of the honourable senators who have spoken. I especially want to express appreciation and commend the young side from the Barbados government team, starting with the youngest and newest Senator Janelle Odell, who has already been given her flowers by Madam Deputy President, all the way up to young Minister Shane Archer. I think I've used a cricketing term to describe what this means, Madam Deputy President, and I've said to them what I'll say now publicly. This is what succession planning in a political party looks like, Madam Deputy President. When you have a strong international team, a strong batting side, a strong bowling side, you have a strong test team, a strong limited overs, 20 T10 team, you have a strong intermediate team, you have a strong first division, you have a strong second division team. That's what the government side has presented. And I want to commend every one of them that has spoken already today. Now, Mr. President, Madam President, Deputy President, over the course of the last 3 days, we've heard a number of things raised on this appropriation bill. We've heard sectors raised by all members sitting around the table. The health ministry, of course, I'll start there, which is my own responsibility, transport and works, people empowerment and elder affairs, education. We've spoken about that. A lot has been said about culture, youth, and sport, and of course, the general management of the country's economy, or fiscal policy, and all of the things that Barbadians are concerned about. So I want to take a moment now, as I wrap up today's debate, to go through some of the things. I took the time as I listened attentively to every speaker over the course of the last 3 days and clustered the themes that I heard coming through the debate so that I could respond to them. Fiscal credibility and what some were terming as overruns. Carifesta spending came up a couple of times, and I believe that the senior minister, Senator Christopher Sinclair, and Minister with responsibility for culture, Senator Shane Archer, spoke with those things expansively, and so I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time on those. What is public sector accountability by way of the estimates of expenditure process? What is required? And I want to take a moment to thank Senator Andrew Niles for what I consider also to be an excellent maiden speech, but also a master class in public sector finance and public sector accounting. There have been all kinds of queries raised, and in many instances, people who simply do not understand public accounting, public sector financing, and how the government sector works. In my opening presentation, Madam Deputy, I took the time. At the time, I was not in such good, fine voice as I am today. My voice has gotten better today, but the time I took in my opening presentation to talk about what the estimates of expenditure represented, how the estimates then intersected with the budgetary statement, how the program budgets within ministries collided with the estimates of expenditure, how the commitment for results framework then focused on the outcomes of the work program, how the missions frameworks then fit into the overall ecosystem, and then the specific heads of expenditure. And then if you were to break it down even more, you have your central government expenditure, and you bring to book also your state-owned enterprise expenditure. And if you were to go back to the framing of the Public Finance Management Act, you would see you have your central government framing, your state-owned enterprise framing, and your commercial state-owned enterprise framing. So entities like the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which I spoke about, like the Sanitation Services Authority that Senator Ramon Aline spoke about, they're considered to be state-owned enterprises, yes, but they're not commercial state-owned enterprises. They depend on cash transfers from central government, and you will see them under the parent ministry, in this case, in both instances, the Ministry of Health. In contrast, and you heard Senator Ryan Ford speaking about the tourism sector, the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., That falls under the Ministry of Tourism. Their source of financing comes from the airport service charge, and those funds are transferred initially up to a cap at $75 million over the last several years, but this year you will see in the estimates that has been increased to $100 million in transfers coming from the airport service charge. That doesn't come from local revenue, from VAT or anything like that, but from the airport services charge. So you have different types of entities. Under the Ministry of Tourism as well, Madam Deputy President, you have the Grantley Adams International Airport and the Bridgetown Port, both defined in Schedule 2 of the Public Finance Management Act, the PMFA, as commercial state-owned enterprises. They receive no transfers from central government, and you would not see that captured in the estimates of expenditure. Because they're commercial state-owned enterprises, they have their own sources of revenue, and what you may see is not in the estimates of expenditure, but in the estimates of revenue under the estimates process, Madam Deputy. So I wanted to take some more time just to explain that for the benefit of the public. And of course, the question of supplementary resources, we heard quite a bit of that. Some attempted to cast it as poor planning, some attempted to frame it as cost overruns, some attempted to cast it as all kinds of things. But it is a simple accounting matter, and I believe that Senator Niles covered it extremely well in his presentation to the Honourable the Senate. But in summary, let me just use an example. When we talked about changing times, every single senator who stood in this chamber over the past 3 days talked about changing times, whether it was COVID, whether it was war, whether it's changing times locally from one generation to the next. Everything is a changing time. And so in changing times, circumstances change. In my own ministry, now, Madam Deputy, once upon a time, under the drug service, you used to have people ordering drugs for a given year, and you know what the contracting terms would look like. Now, under the leadership of Prime Minister Motley and under this administration, we have put what is not a buzzword, and you heard the Deputy President in her presentation speaking about it, resilience. So in our resilience agenda, it doesn't just mean climate and preparations for hurricanes and buildings and infrastructure and hurricane straps that you will see from the Ministry of Transport and Works, but you also see, Madam Deputy, the importance of us keeping stockpiles of supplies in country. And so you now have a mandate during the course of a financial year, after estimates have already been planned, a directive being given. Ensure you have 3 months' worth of supplies. That means that you immediately are spending more than you have budgeted for in that financial year. Then a war breaks out, changing times. A war breaks out, and supply chains are interrupted. And the Prime Minister says, Barbados must never again be in an environment as happened with COVID. So move from 3 months and now stockpile 6 months. All of a sudden, your expenditure for an entity like the drug service has changed during the course of the financial year. And that's why in February, earlier this year, we had visionary leadership for changing times as our mantra. And that's what we're talking about now, Madam Deputy. In each incarnation of each change, our leadership has determined that Barbados and this government must prepare our country for whatever comes. And so supplemental resources during the course of a financial year will always correlate to those changes. Then we heard comments being raised about the audit office and the ability of the audit office to manage government's resources. So when the government is spending all this money, where is it coming from? Where is it going? How are we accounting for it? And I want to also thank Senator Niles yet again for going through into the weeds of the estimates. I suppose that the Honourable Senator representing the opposition at this point perhaps may have followed the example of his former leader and not learned how to read the estimates book. But if you were to go through the estimates as shared by Senator Niles, you would see which percentage of the estimates was assigned to programming expenditure as opposed to that which was programmed for personal emoluments. Salaries and wages, in simple terms. Salaries and wages for people, employment for Barbadians working in the government as distinct from programmed expenses. And so you will see that the Audit Office, for example, falls under Parliament. And let me be clear when I say that. It falls under the expenditure head for Parliament. It does not fall under a government department. So I am hoping, just me, Lisa, hoping that a functioning Public Accounts Committee by someone who is willing to do all of the work and not some of the work, as we saw in the last PAC, is able to support the expansion of the Audit Office in accordance with what the realities are. And what are those realities, Madam Deputy President? In every single sector, you have heard the Prime Minister say this before, there are things that keep her up at night, a couple of them. One of them is skills in this country. Not the fact that they're not available, the fact that they're not available to the public service. We live in a generation where people have the option of being global citizens. We call them that all the time. They don't have to come and work in Barbados. And if they do come to work in Barbados, they don't have to come and work in the public sector. And many of them, whether it is accountants who are choosing, young accountants that we are producing in abundance through the University of the West Indies, as audit professionals who are choosing to go into the private sector, whether it is engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, renewable energy engineers that are not choosing to come into the public sector for roads, for energy, or any of those things, but into the private sector, whether it is specialist medical skills and it's a Honourable that are choosing to go into private practice. Right now, in the Accident and Emergency Department, we have 6 vacancies for emergency medicine doctors. But it's not that we're not producing them. We're producing them, but the opportunities for remuneration are greater in the private sector than in the government sector. So let's not politicize this question of the Audit Office not being adequately staffed. Across the country, this is still a democracy. People can still choose where they want to work and what they want to work for. Let us not politicize that. And so, across the government, what has been the government's response? The government has undertaken over the course of the last year, maybe even more than just the last year, a comprehensive regrading exercise in the government. So should the government just pay more to one and not the other? Or should the government practice fairness across the board? And the government, this government, has chosen to do the latter. A comprehensive regrading exercise has been underway in the public service over the last year, led not by this political party, but by the head of the public service and their team, and it is being led by the Cave Hill School of Business in their independent capacity to do the consulting work, to feed that in and give recommendations to the government. And what does that mean? What has that meant? That not only does the Audit Office get to look at what the actual scale of compensation and the role of that office should be relative to what it is now, but that the entire public sector is in a position to say, look, so many skills are underrated. So many jobs are under-remunerated. So many things need to change in the grading of public service, which we have not had for how long? Not since this government was last in office. And so it's being done now. That's the commitment of a government leading for changing times. And so we're doing so even with personnel. We talked about the economic role of culture and sport, and we heard from Senator John King and a detailed explanatory presentation on the estimates themselves from the Minister of State in that area. And so I want now to be able to balance the varying things that we have heard in terms of the public conversation. From our side, on the government side, we framed this appropriation bill as what we know it to be, a long-term development strategy for the country and visionary leadership in areas which matter to Barbadians. A number of senators, and I want to thank especially our independent senators for raising a number of queries, Senator Slocum, Senator Ford, Senator Niles, Senator Connell, Senator John Rogers, who is not here today, as well as Senator Andrew Malalou. You raised a number of issues. You talked about execution risks. What are those execution risks for such an ambitious program? What are the controls that government has in place? That was raised by some members as well. And does our level of expenditure align with measurable outcomes? That's where the missions framework comes in. That's where the commitment for results framework comes in. That's where the program budget then lines back up with the commitment for results framework. That's what this government has put in place. The commitment for results framework did not exist before. Neither did the missions exist before. So this government has demonstrated that it is clearly giving a commitment on how we can have stronger controls, stronger systems, and measurable outcomes. Now, on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, I think many members of this honourable chamber spoke about the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and challenges there. I'll tell you a personal story. A few weeks ago, I was in a location and someone got sick. They were having a respiratory reaction. So I heard everything that everyone said around the table over the last few days. And it resonated with me because I've seen it up close and personal in the last few days, last few months, last few weeks, I should say, last month that I've sat in this room. And I was sitting in a public place, and this lady, she got unwell, she got sick. And she was having what appeared to be an asthma attack. Now, anybody who knows the accident and emergency department knows that persons who are pregnant and in labor, persons who are asthmatic, they have dedicated pathways and they're expedited and they go through. But this woman was having what appeared to be an asthma attack. I got up from where I was, I went to her to see, I went to the people who were around her, assisting her to see if there was anything that I could do. And when I got there, she was in a state of distress. And I looked at her immediately and I could see how she needed medical intervention. And I said to them, she needs to go to the emergency room. Get her to the emergency room. And they said, should we call an ambulance? I said, I don't think you have the opportunity to call the ambulance. If we're not far from QEH, put her in a car and get her to the QEH. She got to the QEH and I called ahead to let them know this person was incoming. And she got there. After she was on her way, the people who were assisting her, you know what they said to me, Madam Deputy President? They said to me she was having an asthma attack. But the minute you mentioned to her that she needed to go to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, she started to have a panic attack. And that exacerbated what was already happening to her. That she was so terrified, not only of going to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, because we have to understand where people are. She was traumatized at the idea of having to go to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, not only because there are issues at the hospital and how long she would have to wait, but she was a single mother. She had a 15-year-old daughter, and there was no one else to look after her. How does the Ministry of Health, together with the Ministry with responsibility for People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, provide cross-collaboration and social services to help people who need to get health care? Because the alternative for her not getting care is that she goes back home, she gets sicker, and then her daughter, who she's so worried about, could potentially be without her only parent. So these estimates, for example, don't necessarily show the correlation between how ministries work together. But did you know that there is a social work department and the social agencies actually do come in to the accident and emergency room from the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs to assist in cases like those? Those are the kinds of things that are embedded not just in the estimates, but in the broader macro policy framework that will govern the rollout of these estimates. I will not stand here and say to you that there are not challenges in the accident and emergency room as it stands right now. However, what I've said to you is that the problem does not start with A&E. It begins elsewhere in our system, in our primary healthcare system. We as a government have demonstrated in our estimates of expenditure through the provision of financing to reform and to rehabilitate not just the physical infrastructure, but the systems of the public polyclinics in particular to be able to address what comes first. We as a government have also indicated that as it relates to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital itself, we are committed in these estimates to providing money to support the expansion of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, because Senator Connell is absolutely right. We can't change and expand the footprint of the accident and emergency room without having additional capacity for additional beds for tertiary care on the wards. That is a part of our process. Right now, as many of the members of the public know, the number of beds is even lower than it was before, and that is simply because the public is aware, and we don't always draw the correlations between what happens on one hand and what happens on the other. We saw that there was a fire, and we saw that there was a roof that partially collapsed on one of our wards. We saw that happen on 2 wards in particular, so 2 wards in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital have been out of commission to allow for those things to be rehabilitated. Mercifully, we're coming close to the end of that rehabilitation, we hope, and the same thing happened with our operating theaters. We're hoping, and the money has already been provided, again, supplemental resources during the course of the financial year because you had issues with the operating theaters. And so yes, 3 of 9 have been working for the last little while, but the other ones that needed to be done have now been rehabilitated, and they're working through with the company on questions relating to air conditioning, ventilation, and so on. But let's also understand ourselves. Let's not always talk about these things through partisan lenses. I remember the Queen Elizabeth Hospital predates me, predates most of us in this room. But when we walk through the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, it's amazing how cool the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is. It's one of the coolest buildings to walk through. The breeze comes through those decoration blocks on one side. But let's also understand the reality of it. That breeze coming through on one side of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, paired with a modern operating theater that needs to be at a certain temperature of cooling, creates the very conditions for the mold and the condensation that we're constantly complaining about. So the facility, as it stands now, was not built in a time where the equipment that needs to be maintained at a temperature that it does now was in place. So our facilities need to be expanded. And that is the answer to why we are expanding the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and not just in the current space in situ, but across the way in a new location. So the commitment in these estimates and of this government is to improve community health care, to improve primary health care, to improve what is happening internal to the community, to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But my own commitment as the new Minister of Health, I'm not the medical doctor. I'm the systems girl. I'm the structures girl. I'm the process flow kind of girl. And so it is about how do we get all these different things using systems and design thinking and business process reengineering to make these things all work together, so that Barbadians can have the best healthcare system that we deserve. We deserve it, and it is our commitment as a government to be able to deliver it. Now, as I said before, I'm not going over Carrie Festa. I can waste no time on that at this point. It's already been covered. Senator Goodridge spoke about a number of things, and I must say that Senator Goodridge, although shorter in the tooth than Senator Walters, was far more strategic in her presentation. And so she shared a balance, and she talked about, Madam Deputy President, about what the concerns were in terms of short-term solutions on the one hand, but uncertainty about long-term solutions. She talked about, while some measures showed relief, demonstrated relief, they did not always present the kind of certainty or timeliness that was required. And I want to say, leadership for changing times. You can change only so far as you can see ahead of you. And we have this term, certainly in the cabinet, that this is leadership with your head on a swivel. On any given day, you turn one direction, you got to turn back the next. And so while there is a comprehensive plan, long-term strategy, we've heard that, we've seen that over a long time, certainly the 7 years that we have been in government, almost 8 now, what you're seeing is a number of reactionary measures and proactive measures because of changing times. That's what leadership does. A leader makes sure that the long-term plan is not imperiled by short-term circumstances. And so that's what you're seeing in these estimates as well. That's where coherence comes in. And so what you're seeing is not just spending, you're seeing policy and long-term coherence. It says that government is being strategic, and it says that we are building what we can build now. We are planning for what we need to build in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, but we're also making sure that the allocations fit into the short-term roadmap, the medium-term roadmap, as well as the long-term roadmap. Now, one issue was raised that I want to also address, having spoken about the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Senator Ali spoke about the Sanitation Services Authority, the Transport Board. That was raised by at least 2 honourable senators as well. And the reality is that Senator Niles is absolutely correct. The structure of the Barbados Transport Board, as it currently is and has always been, is not sustainable. It costs more to run it than the revenue that is generated from it. But it is a public good. It is a public good. Like water is a public good, like the sanitation services is a public good, like the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is a public good. That is why it would have been erroneous for anyone to say that we are selling the Transport Board. We're not selling the Transport Board. We're not privatizing the Transport Board. What has been proposed under the Mass Transit Authority, which is also accounted for in these estimates, is a structure that empowers workers, employment generation, empowerment financially, but it also maintains government's commitment to a public good in the Transport Board by financing the Transport Board, as you have seen in the estimates of expenditure. So we're now allowing for what we call avoidable variance, unavoidable variance, and preventable management failure. That's what is being proposed now to address the issues of the Barbados Transport Board. Senator Slocum also raised issues relating to culture, governance, and entertainment. He talked about roads as well and traffic. And of course, I believe that Senator Sinclair spoke about the flyovers that you raised before. And there was a critique about the NCF. Now, Senator Archer is just about 4 weeks also in the role, but under the previous minister who used to sit in this room, there was a body of work that was started on how to reform and to modernize the National Cultural Foundation to make it fit for purpose. And the reason for that is visionary leading for changing times, visionary leadership for changing times. All of us as cabinet ministers have been given a responsibility to do 2 things: deconstruct and reconstruct. Deconstruct and reconstruct. It is the reason why, I know Senator Malalu is not here today, but I know he's listening. It is the reason why KIPO was deconstructed and Business Barbados was reconstructed. But let us not pretend that we don't know that things that have been 30 years long in the making, and I said it then and I'll say it now, will take time to completely reform. It does not happen by magic. And yes, there are service level agreements, and those are things which have been done at the level of the board, and there are standards that are being met. But deconstructing processes is a process by definition. It is not a final destination. Right now, we have Business Barbados advertising, unlike KIPO, that would not have done it before, advertising, inviting nonprofit organizations to come to a community clinic, because one of the issues that we've navigated over many years is the fact that the annual returns have to be filed, and many persons don't know that they have to file them. The accountants in here would know that. Nonprofit companies, nonprofit organizations get caught in that trap. Small businesses get caught in that trap. And KIPO that once was, and Business Barbados that now is, deconstructed and reconstructed, deconstructed close to 400 or 500 business processes to make it more manageable and to be able to reduce, and I think it was Senator Ali who talked about, do we need to have 10 words when we only need 4? Equally, do we need 10 processes when we only need 2? And that's what they have done. That's what they've done. And they've now taken the responsibility of proactively engaging with the public. The National Cultural Foundation, like every other agency in government, was also meant to deconstruct and to reconstruct and to be recalibrated. It is a reason why, during my tenure as Minister of Energy and Business, you saw KIPO move from KIPO to Business Barbados. It is a reason why you saw trust loans go through an internal transition alongside the back end of fund access. It is a reason why you saw the amalgamation of the energy companies into a single company, the Barbados National Oil Company, the National Petroleum Corporation, and the Barbados National Terminal Company now consolidated into a single company, which also helps with our estimates and our accounting because you brought those balance sheets all together. You brought forward the efficiencies into a single entity, and now you have the Barbados National Energy Company. Every agency deconstructed and reconstructed. Happy to have had Senator Archer respond also on the plans for the entertainment industry, and I'm certainly looking forward to that expansion. Now, I want then to move quickly and steadily to a couple of specific questions. When I summarize the questions that the Chamber appears to be asking, I want to attempt to answer them quickly. Are ministries under budgeting known costs and then regularizing them later? No. Ministries are accounting for planned expenditure, and then when unavoidable variances come about, they are accounting for them later by way of supplemental resources. And when we talk about transparency, by definition, it's not our fault if people can't read the estimates, Madam Deputy President. It's not our fault if you can't read the estimates. The estimates, and by way, every resolution that comes through this chamber says what it is there for. Supplemental resources also come this way, but Madam Deputy President, I also want to be clear, money bills, by definition, don't come here. So when new resolutions come in the other place, as they will next week, and they are amended to allow for supplemental resources, it's not our fault if people aren't paying attention to Parliament and documents that are laid in Parliament. Money bills do not come to the Senate, they go to the other place. That's where the transparency comes. That's where the reconciliation comes. We get the final appropriations bill in the upper place as we have gotten the planned appropriations bill today for us to go through. We will have, inevitably, at the end of the financial year, the Senate will meet to approve the final appropriations bill that reconciles the actuals with the outturns. And that's what will come to the Senate. But it is our responsibility not just to posture and pontificate, but to pay attention to what happens in Parliament, both houses. So supplemental spending, par for the course for those reasons, and government is sharing the actual outturns in the final appropriations bill. We have very clear commentary about the cost of Carifesta, managing cost versus value. There is no one in their reasonable mind who is expecting that in 1981 it would have cost $20-something million, but that in 2025, it would cost $4 million. Nobody who is reasonable, but somebody who's trying to be mischievous. And because we as a people, we are Barbadians, and we have to be very careful not to let people lead us down the garden path because it sounds salacious and it sounds mischievous. Sometimes we let people run away with things and we repeat things because they're often said, but they sound as silly the last time as they were the first time they were said, Madam Deputy President, and I hope that we can move on from there with the detailed responses that have been given. Is the audit office too weak? I think we've established that there is some work that needs to be done with the audit office, and I'm looking forward to the outcomes of the regrading exercise. Now, in the QEH, I'm coming back to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and to the healthcare system. This is one of the questions that was raised, is there a timetable for step-down hospice rehabilitation and post-acute care? How will staffing shortages be solved, especially nursing and technical specializations? Those are things which are very much underway. I believe I'd said in my opening presentation that we're working with a number of countries to be able to service short-term goals. We have already met, I myself met along with my leadership team with the leadership of the Barbados Community College, specifically on the nursing program to start. And we have looked at currently, the Barbados Community College is producing, I believe their optimum number is 70 nurses that they can produce on an annual basis. And they would like to be able optimally to produce 100 nurses. And here's what the Barbados Community College leadership said to me in the Department of the Division of Health Sciences. They said this to me: when we were trying to increase to 150, 100 and something nurses in intake on an annual basis, because we don't have the requisite number of nursing educators and we don't have the necessary clinical and laboratory skills to be able to have the practical training made available, that's when we saw our highest failure rate. Our best practice average for a high failure rate to meet the regional standard is around 70. We would optimally like to be able to reach 100. But in order to do that, we need more nursing educators. And so what is my ministry doing? Looking to bring in more nursing educators and to train them up. And equally, to be able to work with the Barbados Community College to develop specializations in nursing, because there are some specializations I never even knew existed. And of course, that would include midwifery. And so that work is underway. With the University of the West Indies as well, I am looking forward to having an engagement with them. I have not had a full engagement with them, but only a partial engagement with individuals affiliated with the institution. But there is an opportunity for us to see what exactly are the opportunities for the disciplines of medicine in all of its offshoots, so that we're able to better service Barbados' needs. And equally, this is a call. It is a call for our diaspora, since it is only Barbadians, Senator Connell, you said, who would want to come back home and work for pay that would perhaps not be what they have access to in other jurisdictions. We need Barbadians to be able to come home and to work in our healthcare sector and to have the benefit, even if there are professionals who have built capacity and who have the ability to work along with the University of the West Indies, who have the ability to come and teach, who have the ability to consult, who have the ability to advise at the level of the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy President. Please continue, Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It probably will make it easier for me to say what I've gotten so used to saying, Mr. President. So we talked about what is the plan for the nursing department, same thing for pharmacy skills. I didn't even know, Mr. President, that there were oncological pharmacists. And so I met some of them in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. One of the other things that we started to look at, Madam Deputy President, because I'll tell you, I am probably too comfortable in my skin to think that I know everything. I don't know the answers to everything. I'm comfortable with intellectual humility and learning from others. And so I've spent a lot of time hearing from the professionals in the Ministry of Health whose business this is. And one of the things that they have said to me on the question of the specialist skills in pharmacy, I couldn't understand the first day that I did a tour of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital why there were so many people in the outpatient clinic downstairs by the pharmacy waiting to fill a prescription. And one of the things that they said to me was that when you fill a prescription, when you are being discharged from hospital, that you have to have your medication to go home with you. Okay, that's fine, no problem. Take your medication home with you. But some of the medication, especially for persons who have non-communicable diseases and who need to be treated over time, may have a refill capacity for 3 months or 6 months. But certain medications under our current system can only be dispensed in a hospital, and they can't be dispensed anywhere else. And so when people leave the hospital and they're discharged, you have these large numbers of people coming back into the hospital system. Those are some of the things that we have committed to looking at and to figuring out, because there are systems that are in place. And the head of the drug service and the pharmacy teams in the QEH have given me a clear pathway as to how those things can be dealt with, and I'm committed to working with them to deliver solutions so that people do not have to go through the inconvenience of making their way to Martindale's Road every single time they need to get a prescription refilled, but that they can go to a polyclinic or a pharmacy near to them anywhere in this country. Mr. President. So I've tried to go through the majority of the things that I've heard generally. Senator Ramon Aline, in his presentation on the Sanitation Services Authority, gave a detailed elaboration on what he found the first time he went to the SSA, what he found on the second occasion he went to the SSA. And now, under this administration, while 95% of Barbadians have no difficulty with garbage collection, what is also being proposed at this stage is that what do we need to get to biweekly garbage collection? And by biweekly garbage collection, we're talking not just about the refuse that finds its way into the landfills, but we're talking about recycling plans. We're talking about the circular economy. We're talking about the relationship with our landfills and how we dispose of different wastes. And so we've already started to navigate what some of those issues could look like and what the future of the mangrove landfill is and what the options are using new technology solutions. So Mr. President, look, these estimates, this is a big document. It's a detailed document. It's technical. And a lot of people will never have the opportunity to look at the estimates. And if they look at the estimates, it looks like gibberish. And I've deliberately taken the time to augment what was said before and what needs to still be explained. But what I'm clear about and what I want to say to Barbadians is that this Barbados Labour Party government does not and cannot govern by line items alone. They cannot govern by line items in estimates of expenditure alone. We cannot govern in a vacuum. We cannot govern by short-term intentions. We can only, Mr. President, focus on what Barbados at its best can be, what Barbados in changing times is, and rationalize what needs to be done for a Barbadian people that deserves nothing but the best under its government. We can't focus only on the basics. There's no one in this country who for their lifetime only ever wants to eat rice and corned beef, even though I know of somebody who likes corned beef bakes. But nobody in their life only ever wants to eat rice and corned beef. You have to aspire to love fish. You have to aspire to want to have a steak. You have to aspire to want to taste lobster. And so vision isn't about playing small, and Minister and Senator Reid talks about this. Vision and ambition are not bad words. They're not curse words, Mr. President. They're not. That's what this Barbados Labour Party is committed to, visioning, showing people. Earlier this morning, Mr. President, as we sat in this chamber, we were surrounded by people who are younger than us both. We were surrounded by young, yes, especially you, but both of us. We were surrounded by people who represent the future of Barbados. We can't play small in the face of those youngsters. We can't play safe between bat and pad only. There are times where we'll have to keep the bat close to the pad, for sure. But if we play no big shots, No fours, no sixes. There is no cricket team that wins like that. And this Barbados Labour Party, this government side, if I started with a cricketing analogy about us having an international team with tests, 20s, 10s, first division, second division, we will not play back close to the pad on every shot. There are sometimes we will hit for sixes like Mission Economy, where we're talking about the birthright grant. There are times we will hit for six, where we're talking about flyovers. There are times we will hit for fours and sixes if you get a little further. And we talk about a brand new state-of-the-art Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which of course is now dear to my heart. And then there are times we will play back close to pad because we play defensive games and we know that down the road, we've got things that have to be mitigated against in the energy crisis. And I want to take a moment to just answer one particular issue on the energy crisis here. When this government came to office in 2018, yes, we had a number of solar applications, but I make no apologies for saying, Mr. President, that Barbados has come leaps and bounds ahead of where it was when we first came to office in our renewable energy transition. Leaps and bounds ahead of it. We now have new legislation governing a sector that did not exist before. We now have new frameworks that govern a sector that did not exist before. And one of the things that we have to be clear on, and I saw a newspaper article saying, if we have oil, why are we paying for oil elsewhere? And I looked at the article and I thought, what? But that's a lack of understanding with a microphone. The implications of lack of understanding and lack of knowledge, but being given a microphone. Barbados has oil fields. Yes, we have about 250-something oil fields. Half of them are not in use. About 55 of them are producing at approximately 15% capacity. We have not invested new resources into oil fields in decades. But even when we did, we don't have refinery capacity in this country, even so. So the heavy fuel oil that we import into this country is refined oil. It's not produced here. And sometimes it is important, and I say this as somebody who understands, I think it was Senator Sinclair, who talked about intellectual rigor. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of intellectual rigor to do some research, comprehensive research, and if you don't know, call a friend. Use the call a friend option and ask somebody before using a platform to share complete misinformation and to demonstrate an absolute lack of understanding. It is unfortunate, but I think that there's an opportunity for us to take persons and to help guide, even if they are clearly not necessarily in possession of the knowledge that they are purporting to have access to. But they can do better, I am certain. So we expect that the measures that were announced by the Honourable Minister of Finance, which are also accounted for in these estimates, on fuel, on renewable energy, on the extension of the tariff regime for electric vehicles is a part of the equation for Barbados. So on overspending, here's my answer to you. We are exposed to all kinds of shocks. Climate shocks, pandemic shocks, God forbid one comes our way, commodity shocks, global volatility, and the adjustments that you have seen are sometimes, oftentimes, unavoidable. What matters is what we have been demonstrating, that they are transparently authorized, that they are responsibly managed, and that they are tied absolutely to outcomes. On the audit office, we can't be serious about reform, but casual about audit capacity. So we accept that there's work to be done there, and that has to be done. Strong oversight is absolutely a commitment to trust in Barbados, and we as a government are committed to that. On traffic, Barbadians are not talking about a debate between flyovers versus potholes. We're talking about both ambition and the basics. The basics and ambition can coexist. It does not need to be either or. On culture, we're talking about commercializing, as Senator Archer said, commercializing Barbadian creativity without commodifying it away from what makes us Barbadian. And so, Mr. President, I commend this appropriations bill to this honorable chamber. The bill shows us, gives us, lays out, the bill lays out what our estimates look like during the course of the year. For the Office of the President, $2.4 million. For Parliament, $17.1 million. Prime Minister's Office, $354.9 million. Ministry of Finance, $325 million. Cabinet Office, $29 million. Audit, $1.7 million. Treasury, $54 million. New ministry created and finance, Ministry of Public Service and Talent Development, $11 million. Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, $31 million. Director of Public Prosecutions, $2.6 million. Attorney General, $18.5 million. MIS, $159.67 million. Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, including all of our overseas offices all across the world. There are 14 overseas missions, $79.7 million. And just to be clear, when we talk about things that are extraneous to our control and things happening that are not planned, no one would have imagined that what we saw happening in the Gulf would have happened. But we have a mission in Abu Dhabi. And so that mission under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs inevitably will have to bring to book what it cost us to get Barbadians out of that region. And that is what Barbados did, as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs led the charge to bring Barbadians who were in the Gulf, in Abu Dhabi and elsewhere, safely home to Barbados and out of a war zone. That would have been accounted for. The Ministry of Home Affairs, which includes the Ministry of the Department for Immigration, Immigration Department, $84 million. People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, $145 million. Ministry of Legal Affairs and Criminal Justice, $190.6 million. Ministry of Transport and Works, $159 million. Ministry of Energy and Business, which I spoke about before, $80 million. Ministry of Private and Public Investment, just to be clear, that is mainly an operating budget because much of that is coming from either the capital expenditure associated with those projects. That is programmed at $61.28 million. Post Office, which is also being deconstructed and reconstructed to come into a modern era. Post is no longer what it used to be. That comprehensive reform is also underway, and they're earmarked for $13.6 million. Ministry of Sport and Community Empowerment, $63.4 million. Ministry of Environment, National Beautification, $111 million. Ministry of Technological and Vocational Training, and this includes the allocation for the University of the West Indies to facilitate young Barbadians and young faces like the ones we saw around here today to have access in a post-2018 environment to tertiary level education at the University of the West Indies again. And that allocation is $270 million. Ministry of Agriculture, Food and National Security, $94 million. Ministry of Labor and Social Security, $16.4 million. Ministry of Health and Wellness, $395 million, and that is not inclusive of, and I want to just take a moment to point out that for the Sanitation Services Authority, you have a portion of their expenditure coming from government revenue, and that is coming from the garbage and the sewage tax that is collected by the Barbados Water Authority. That is remitted to the Sanitation Services Authority for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital under the Ministry of Health. That comes from the health levy, which is collected by the National Insurance Scheme, and that is remitted to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And just to answer the question that was raised, I think it was by Senator Walters, about how much money is being allocated from these levies and whether or not they're adequate, let the record show, just to be clear, that in some instances, the allocation from central government being paired with the levies which are being collected, either from the garbage and sewage levy or from the health levy, can fluctuate. They go up and down. So it is a projected amount, but it is not an actual amount. And it is dependent very often on the market. It is connected to people's ability, on the one hand, for the SSA, for the garbage and sewage levy, repaying their water bills. And so when persons do not pay their water bills, and the Barbados Water Authority does not collect that money, the garbage and sewage tax that is meant to go towards the Sanitation Services Authority, then that amount is reduced. And equally so, coming from the NIS, the health services levy, when employment goes up or down, that amount is also fluctuating, which means that, again, once more, supplemental resources would have to be provided from central government to compensate for the shortfall in revenue for both of those agencies. So that's, again, an example of how the estimates work. Ministry of Housing and Lands, $124.5 million. And finally, the Ministry of Education Transformation, $285 million. And these things then would change when you add the amount of foreign financing with the amounts being transferred from central government. These are the estimates of expenditure, Mr. President. This is the appropriation bill, and I beg to move that it be read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. I think the ayes have it. Just to inform you senators, this has been certified as a money bill. We therefore do not go into committee. We go straight into the third reading. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. I think the ayes have it. Next page.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Appropriation Act 2026.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Appropriation Act 2026. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, it has been a long day, the longest day, 3 days long of a day. And that now brings us to the end of this day, 3 days of the appropriations debate. And I want to thank all the honourable members on all sides who have contributed to this debate. It has been a rich and a fulsome debate, and your contributions have all been well noted. And in some instances, we can commit on the government side to providing any additional responses that are necessary based on questions which have been raised. But this brings us to the end of government's business, genuinely now for the day, and I beg to move that the Senate do now be adjourned sine die.
Before I put the question, let me both thank and congratulate the honourable senators for their contributions during this debate. Many of you are new, and it was both a wonderful opportunity to make your maiden speech on such a large platform. But large platforms can also be very daunting. And so imagine if you were, like Senator Slocum, a singer, having your first gig at Radio City Music Hall, you know, or some kind of occasion like that. You'll rather start in the school hall somewhere where you have no friends and so on. But in all seriousness, it's been a rich debate. I want to wish you continued success and thank you for your diverse and varied interaction. Let me also, on your behalf, thank the clerks of Parliament. These 3 days were not standalone days. These came after 2 or 3 weeks in the House of Assembly going through their extended procedures. And along with the clerks whom you see, and the marshal you will see as well, but then there are those behind the scenes, the Hansard reporters and the entire staff, the staff downstairs who kept us fed and watered so that nobody catches a bad feel they use the good major, they've said that you fainted. And as well as the police officers who have kept us safe. They've had extended hours, and we want to thank everyone, the technical team that allows the public near and far, and those of our members who may be there and able to join in by Zoom arrest. And this is one means of enhancing the awareness of Barbadians on the process and the matters and these appropriation bill and the estimates and the budget and what this all means. This is excellent, a rich opportunity for public engagement and public education. So I want to thank all of you. So the question is, that the Honourable, the Senate do now adjourn sine die. Do those Honourable Senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned sine die.